Humans always have such a strange way of deceiving themselves. When I first started working with Ezra, I told myself, I just admire him. A month later, I revised it to, I just like him as a friend. By the second month, I no longer dared to explain it to myself. I just tried not to think about it, because the more I thought about it, the more the first clause in the contract seemed like it had been written just for me. Early June, Ezra accepted a role in a new film. The shooting location was in the mountains of Colorado. The schedule was nearly 3 weeks long. The entire crew had to relocate to a small town more than 2 hours' drive from Denver. It was the quietest place I'd been to since I started this job. No more car horns. No more giant billboards. Mornings held only birdsong and the scent of pine drifting on the wind. The hotel we stayed at had been renovated from an old resort. My room was right next to Ezra's. Olivia joked, "Don't let him oversleep." Ezra laughed. "Rowan is more punctual than an alarm clock." I replied, "Just try oversleeping. I'll knock on your door." "How many times?" "Until you open it." "That sounds terrifying." The three of us laughed together. Little exchanges like that kept multiplying. Without realizing when, we stopped talking only about work schedules. Ezra asked me about the films I liked. I asked him why he'd chosen acting. He told me about his childhood in Seattle, where long rainy days made him want to hide in his room watching movies with his father. I told him about summers in Portland, when my sister and I used to bike to the riverbank for ice cream. We began learning many things about each other. Not the things the press wrote about, but the very ordinary things. The 5th day of shooting, a sudden heavy rain rolled in. The crew was forced to stop work. The director announced an early wrap. Everyone headed to the town's only bar. Ezra didn't go. "I want some quiet." He turned to me. "Want to drive?" "Where to?" "I don't know. Let's just go." So the two of us got into the crew's rented SUV. No bodyguard. No other assistant. Just me and Ezra. He drove himself. The winding road cut through the pine forest, both sides veiled in mist after the rain. The radio played old country songs. Neither of us spoke for nearly 10 minutes. The silence was oddly comfortable, until Ezra suddenly asked, "Rowan." "Yes." "Have you ever been in love?" I hesitated slightly. "Yes. First love. College. Since freshman year." And then, I gave a faint smile. "He didn't love me back." Ezra glanced at me quickly. "I'm sorry. It's fine. It was a long time ago." I turned to ask him back, "What about you?" Ezra was silent for quite a while, long enough that I thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he said very softly, "I have. A long time ago." "Did they know?" "No." "Why not?" He smiled sadly. "Because if I'd said it, everything would have changed." I didn't ask further. For some reason, I had the feeling that story still hadn't ended inside him. The car stopped by a small lake. The lake's surface reflected the gray sky after the rain. No one else was around. Ezra got out first. He stood by the water's edge for a long time. "I like places like this." "Why?" "No one knows who I am." I looked around. It was true. Without the internet, no one would guess the man in the brown jacket standing by the lake was a movie star. "Have you ever thought about quitting entirely?" "I have. Many times." And then, Ezra picked up a stone, threw it into the lake. Ripples spread out. "But acting is the one thing that makes me feel alive." He turned to me. "Do you have something like that?" I didn't need to think. "I do." "What is it?" "Finding someone that every day, coming home, I'd want to tell them how I'd lived that day." Ezra looked at me. For a long time, the look in his eyes made my heart suddenly beat faster than usual. Luckily, right then his phone rang. The moment passed, but the feeling remained. That evening, the whole crew threw a birthday party for one of the camera operators. I'd never been able to drink much. Ezra only took a few sips of wine too. Around 10 o'clock, he leaned close to my ear. "Let's go. Home." "Yeah. I'm tired." We quietly slipped away from the party. The road back to the hotel was lit only by yellow light on the wet pavement. Halfway there, Ezra suddenly spoke. Rowan. Thank you. For what? For you. I laughed. You need to be more specific. He laughed too. Since you arrived, my life has felt quieter. I froze. A cold gust of wind blew past. The pine leaves rustled. I didn't know how to respond, because that sentence should have just been a simple thank you. But coming from Ezra, it made my heart shake violently. I lowered my head, trying to hide my smile, not letting him see it, not letting myself admit it. That with just that one sentence, I had already begun wishing I could stay by his side longer than 6 months. And that was a wish that, from the very beginning, should never have existed. I began counting time in a very strange way. Not by days, not by weeks, but by the months remaining on the contract. For months, then 3.5, then 3. Every time I saw that number on the calendar, an indescribable feeling would rise in my chest, like standing on a train whose final stop I already knew. The farther it traveled, the closer the day I had to get off. The crew wrapped shooting in Colorado 2 days ahead of schedule. When the plane landed in Los Angeles, I thought I'd finally get to rest. I was wrong. Olivia walked up to us the moment we'd collected our luggage. Bad news. Ezra raised an eyebrow. What now? Valmont Fashion wants to change the shoot schedule. Wasn't it next week? They just called. They want tomorrow morning. Ezra sighed. Fine. He turned to me. Sorry. You were supposed to get a break. I smiled. I get paid to work. No. He shook his head. You get paid. But not enough to be worked to exhaustion. I looked at him for a few seconds, then laughed. You're the first boss I've met who keeps telling his employee to rest. Ezra shrugged. I've worked with too many burned-out people before. I don't want to repeat that. The next day's shoot took place at a villa on the Malibu Hills. The whole property had been staged as a Mediterranean summer scene. A swimming pool, olive trees, jazz music, models, cameras. Everyone was busy. While Ezra was changing outfits, I took the chance to check emails. A woman's voice sounded behind me. You're Rowan, right? I turned around. A woman about 25, very beautiful, wearing a simple white dress. I recognized her immediately. Lila Hart, the actress who had co-starred with Ezra in 2 films. The press had once rumored they dated for over a year. Hello, she smiled. I'm looking for Ezra. He's changing. I see. Lila nodded, then stood beside me. After a few minutes of silence, she suddenly asked, Have you worked with Ezra long? Almost 2 months. Does he still forget to eat? I was surprised. Yes. Some days he doesn't remember until the afternoon. Lila laughed softly. Still the same as before. I don't know why. Hearing that, something inside me grew slightly uncomfortable. A very small feeling, but very real, because she knew things about Ezra that I didn't. Knew even his most personal habits. Right then, Ezra walked out. Seeing Lila, he looked a little surprised. Lila, I'm here for a fitting. So we're on the same campaign, it turns out. The two of them hugged. A very natural hug. Very close. I turned away, pretending to keep checking the schedule. But I could still clearly hear them laughing. Hear them bringing up memories from an old film set. Hear them teasing each other. I don't understand why, but something in my chest grew heavy. The shoot ran until the afternoon. On the way back, Ezra sat beside me in the back seat. He noticed I was quieter than usual. You tired? No. Something wrong? No. He looked at me. Rowan. You lie worse than that day with the pancakes. I laughed despite myself. I was just thinking. About what? I hesitated, then asked. You and Lila. Did you two really date? Ezra looked at me for a few seconds, then burst out laughing. Laughing so hard the driver glanced back in the rearview mirror. Why are you laughing? Sorry. He tried to hold it back. It's just. This is the first time anyone's asked me directly. So. No. He answered firmly. Never. But the press likes to write things. He shrugged. Lila's a very close friend. That's all. I nodded slightly. A strange, light feeling of relief spread through me. Immediately, I startled. Wait, did I just feel relieved? Why? Whoever Ezra had dated, what did that have to do with me? I turned to look out the window, trying to hide my confusion. Only one thought remained in my head. Rowan, you're starting to get into dangerous territory. That night, I went back to my apartment. Mason was sitting there watching basketball. Seeing me walk in, he whistled. You look like you just got heartbroken. Nonsense. Or fell in love? I froze for exactly 1 beat, then took off my jacket. No. Mason raised an eyebrow. That was a fast answer. I said no. Okay. He shrugged. But remember this. Remember what? If one day you like someone, don't wait too long to realize it. I laughed. Where'd you get that philosophy? My dad. He used to say, there are people who only pass through your life once. If you let them go, you won't get another chance in this lifetime. That night, I lay in bed for a long time, couldn't sleep. My phone showed a notification for tomorrow's schedule. Below it was the name of the person I'd meet first at 7 in the morning. Ezra Bennett. I looked at that name, then slowly turned the phone face down. Mason's words echoed in my head. There are people who only pass through your life once. I didn't dare think further, didn't dare name my own feelings. But for the first time, I began to be afraid. Afraid of the day the contract would end. Afraid of the day I'd have to return to my old life. And most frightening of all, was the fear that Ezra would become just a name that appeared on screen, while I became a stranger in his life. That thought suddenly made 6 months feel far too short. There are days I truly believed I still had control over my heart. Until that Monday morning. I arrived at Ezra's apartment 15 minutes earlier than usual. Not because of the schedule, but because last night he'd texted just one line. Come early tomorrow. I need to ask you something. That was all. But all night, I kept wondering what could be important enough for him to text me privately about it. 10 to 7. I rang the doorbell. No answer. I tried opening the door with my work keycard. It was unlocked. Ezra? I stepped inside. The apartment was unusually quiet. Winston was lying on the sofa. He lifted his head to look at me, then curled back up to sleep. A faint cough sounded from the kitchen. I hurried in. Ezra was standing leaning against the kitchen counter, a cup of hot water in his hand. One glance was enough to tell something was wrong. His face was flushed. His eyes looked tired. His hair was still messy, as if he'd just woken up. You have a fever, I said almost instantly. Ezra smiled weakly. I was planning to pretend I was fine. Looks like that failed. I stepped closer. Out of reflex, I raised my hand to his forehead. The moment my fingertips touched skin hotter than normal, we both froze. That was the first time I'd initiated touching him. Not to fix his tie, not to hand him a document, but a very natural touch. Very intimate. I pulled my hand back immediately. Sorry. Ezra just shook his head. It's fine. His voice was hoarse from the fever. Maybe around 101. Have you checked? Not yet. Where's the medicine? He pointed toward the cabinet. Everything inside was still untouched. The cold medicine box unopened. The thermometer still in its wrapper. I looked at him. You haven't taken anything? Got back late last night. Fell asleep. I sighed. Sit down. Rowan. Sit. For the first time since we'd started working together, I used a tone that's stern. And surprisingly, Ezra obediently sat down. 20 minutes later, I made porridge, mixed medicine, took his temperature, made him drink enough water. Ezra watched me bustling around the kitchen, the corner of his mouth curling up slightly. I have a feeling. You're treating me like a child. You have a fever. Still an adult. Adults need to listen too. He laughed. Fine. Assistant Rowan. I'm listening. For the first time, I saw him smile not for the cameras. Not out of politeness. Just simply because he felt happy. And I hated to admit it, That smile was beautiful enough to make the whole kitchen feel brighter. Right then, Olivia's call came in. Ezra? He reached for it. I grabbed it first. Let me. Olivia asked urgently the moment she picked up. Where are you two? At home. How's Ezra? Running a fever. The line went silent for 2 seconds. I figured. Listen. There are 3 things scheduled today. An ad shoot. A meeting with the director. A photo shoot. I'll cancel them all. Ezra shook his head immediately. I looked at him, then answered Olivia. Yes. I'll handle it. After hanging up, Ezra sighed. No need to cancel. You have a fever. Just a bit tired. I crossed my arms. Have you looked in the mirror? Not yet. Then go look. He was silent. I can't. Why not? The contract. So many people depend on me. So many people have already prepared. If I take 1 day off, everyone gets affected. I looked at him for a long time, then said slowly, and if you collapse on set, wouldn't that affect things too? Ezra didn't answer. That was the first time I'd won an argument with him. In the afternoon, after taking his medicine, Ezra fell asleep on the sofa. I sat at the dining table handling emails. The apartment was so quiet only the ticking of the clock remained. Winston jumped onto the chair beside me. The cat nuzzled its head against my arm, wanting to be petted. I gently scratched behind its ears while working through emails. Suddenly, I heard a very faint voice. Rowan. I looked up. Ezra was still asleep. Maybe he was talking in his sleep. Don't go. I stood up, walked closer. He frowned slightly. His hand unconsciously clutched the edge of the blanket. He murmured again. Stay. I didn't know what he was dreaming about, didn't know who he was calling for. But hearing those 2 words, my heart suddenly ached. I straightened the blanket over him, then sat down in the chair beside him. I'm not leaving, I said very softly, whether you can hear this or not. I'm still here. Ezra gradually settled into deeper sleep. His breathing evened out. I sat watching him for a long time. No stage lights, no news articles, no millions of fans. Just a man so exhausted he was talking in his sleep. And for the first time, I understood why Olivia had once said, don't let things get complicated, because closeness is dangerous. It doesn't arrive through declarations of love. It arrives through mornings spent making porridge, through pills measured out, through a simple "have you eaten yet?" or a whisper spoken while the other person burns with fever. Those small things are exactly what make a human heart tremble without warning. I looked down at the electronic contract still open on the tablet. The first clause was still there. No romantic feelings are to develop. I smiled faintly, a helpless smile, because by this point, I was no longer sure I was still following that clause. The next morning, Ezra was better. His temperature had gone down. There was a bit of life back in his face. But what gave me the most relief wasn't the thermometer reading. It was that he was smiling again. Good morning. He walked into the kitchen, his hair still a little messy. I owe you a thank you. I was making coffee and didn't look up. You say thank you too much. Is that so? Yeah. Should I use a different word? I laughed. No need. Just stay healthy. Ezra stood watching me for a few seconds. His gaze was strange. No longer the look of a boss toward an assistant. Not quite that of friends, either. As if he was trying to understand something. Olivia arrived right at 8. The moment she walked in, she looked Ezra up and down. Better. Better. She turned to me. You did well. I just made porridge. No. Olivia shook her head. That's not what I mean. She didn't elaborate, but the look in her eyes made me a little uneasy. The schedule was pushed to the afternoon. A rare morning with no meetings. Ezra decided to stay home and read scripts. I sat in the living room handling emails. Around 11, he came out with 2 cups. Coffee. For you. I can make my own. I know. But you took care of me yesterday. Today let me take care of you. I took the cup. It was still warm. Warm. like the strange feeling growing steadily in my chest. While reading emails, I suddenly heard Ezra ask, "Rowan, do you ever feel regret?" "Regret what?" "Youth." I looked up. He was gazing out at the balcony. The sun outside was beautiful. "Why do you ask?" Ezra smiled. "Yesterday, when I had the fever, I dreamed." "About what?" "I dreamed I was back in my sophomore year of college." I was a little surprised. "You went to college?" "I did. 2 years. Then dropped out." "Why?" "Because my first film was a success." He shrugged. "Everything happened too fast. I never got to live like a real student. Never lived in a dorm. Never pulled an all-nighter studying for exams. Never went on a road trip with friends. And never," he paused, "loved someone the way an ordinary student would." I don't know why. Hearing that last line, my heart skipped a beat. That afternoon, we went to the studio. It was a live television program. Besides Ezra, the other guest was a very famous male singer named Dylan. The moment they met backstage, Dylan hugged Ezra very warmly. "Oh my God, it's been so long." Ezra laughed. "Just 3 months. Feels long to me." The two of them talked very naturally, occasionally teasing each other. A crew member leaned close to me. "You're the new assistant?" "That's right. Watch out." "Why?" She smiled mischievously. "Dylan loves teasing Ezra. He's always pretending to flirt in front of the press. Fans love it." I laughed along, but for some reason, I didn't actually find it funny. Right as the show began, the host suddenly asked, "If you had to pick someone in the entertainment industry to date, who would each of you choose?" The audience burst into laughter. Dylan didn't need to think. "Ezra." Everyone cheered. Ezra's turn. He laughed helplessly. "I knew you'd say that." "What about you?" the host pressed. Ezra looked at Dylan, then shook his head. "I won't pick anyone." "Why not?" "Because the person I like doesn't work in this industry." The whole studio erupted. The host immediately followed up. "Really?" Ezra just smiled. "That's all I can say." I was standing backstage. I suddenly felt my heart pounding. Not because I thought that person was me. I wasn't foolish enough for that. But because, for the first time I realized, somewhere in Ezra's heart, there had once been someone. Or perhaps, there still was. After the taping, once most people had left, Ezra and I walked down to the parking lot together. I tried to act normal, but he noticed anyway. "You're quiet today." "I'm tired." "Liar." He laughed. "Fine." I sighed. "I'm just curious." "About what?" "The person you mentioned on stage." Ezra opened the car door, silent for a few seconds, then turned to me. "You watched that too?" I was standing right behind the curtain. He leaned back against the car. "Actually, there's no one." "What do you mean?" I said that to get the host to change the subject. I looked at him. "Really? Really?" He smiled. "I've never loved anyone. At least, not yet." I don't know why. Hearing that answer, I felt a strange relief again, and immediately I scolded myself. What was I hoping for? I was an assistant. I shouldn't be happy about my boss's love life. Shouldn't care about it at all. But the heart doesn't read contracts. It only knows that every day beside Ezra, every day seeing his smile, every day hearing him say my name, made the thought of leaving him after 6 months a little bit harder. And I began to fear that by the time the contract ended, the only thing that would remain intact would be that first clause, because my heart had probably broken it long ago. By the middle of the 3rd month, I'd nearly forgotten what my life used to be like. I no longer woke up to an alarm. I woke up to Ezra's schedule. I couldn't even remember the last time I'd had a full day off. Couldn't remember what it felt like for weekends to feel different from weekdays. But the most frightening thing was that I'd started to find that completely normal. One Wednesday morning, Olivia walked into the office looking thrilled. "Good news." Ezra looked up from a stack of scripts. "Please don't say it's more work." "No." Even better. You've been nominated. Ezra froze. The Horizon Award. I looked up too. It was one of the most prestigious film awards of the year. If he won, Ezra's career would step into an entirely new phase. Olivia smiled. The ceremony is in 3 weeks. We need to prepare. Ezra only nodded very slightly. No shout of joy. No excitement. After Olivia left, I asked, "Aren't you happy?" "I am. But," he smiled faintly, "the more famous you become, the less your life belongs to you." I didn't know how to respond, because in that voice, there was no arrogance, just a quiet, very real weariness. That afternoon, we went for a costume fitting for the award ceremony. The designer brought over 10 different tuxedos, each one custom-tailored. Ezra changed continuously. I noted down every detail. The moment he stepped out in the first black suit, the whole room fell silent. Even the designer nodded in approval. "This is it. I think we found the right one." I looked at Ezra. Took me a few seconds to remember what I needed to say. He was too beautiful, not in a flashy way, but with a mature, composed elegance that made it hard to look away. Ezra turned to me. "Rowan? How does this one look?" I fumbled. Very, very handsome." The designer laughed. "Just handsome?" I scratched my head. "What I mean is, if you wear this on the red carpet, people will probably forget to blink." The whole room burst out laughing. Ezra laughed too. But once everyone turned back to work, he leaned close to me. "Thank you." "For what?" "For always being honest." That night, on the way home, it suddenly began to rain. Rain isn't common in Los Angeles. So when it comes, the city turns strangely quiet. Ezra looked out the window. Change of route. Where to? "I know a place." The car turned off the main avenue. After about 20 minutes, it stopped in front of a small seaside restaurant. No fancy sign, no wall of bodyguards, just yellow light and the smell of freshly baked apple pie. I looked at him, surprised. "You can come here?" "The owner knows me, and she hates the press more than she hates taxes." I laughed. The owner smiled the moment she saw Ezra. "Usual spot?" "Yes." She looked at me. "New friend." I started to explain, but Ezra answered first. "Yes." A very short word. But not my assistant. Rather, friend. I was silent. I don't know why, just that one word made my heart warm in a way I couldn't quite explain. We ordered 2 slices of apple pie and coffee. The place was empty. Outside the window, the sound of waves. Ezra rested his chin on his hand, watching the rain. "I discovered something." "What?" "Since you arrived." I laugh more. I smiled lightly. "Maybe I'm just funny." "No." He shook his head. "You make me feel at ease." "Why?" "I don't have to pretend." That sentence made me freeze. Ezra continued. "Do you know what I like most about you?" I shook my head. "You've never once asked to take a photo with me." I laughed. "That's a pretty low bar." "No." He smiled. "Low but rare. Everyone wants to take home a piece of Ezra Bennett. But you only ask if I've eaten." I looked down at my coffee cup, not daring to meet his eyes, because I was afraid. If I looked a few seconds longer, he would read everything I was trying to hide. When we left the restaurant, the rain still hadn't stopped. Ezra hadn't brought an umbrella. I opened the only umbrella I had. The two of us were forced to stand very close together. His shoulder occasionally brushed against mine. The faint scent of his cologne mixed with the smell of the rain. Neither of us spoke. Halfway there, Ezra suddenly spoke up. "Rowan. If later the contract ends, I'd still want to see you." I stopped walking, looked at him. "Would you be okay with that?" Time seemed to slow. The rain kept falling. The waves kept crashing. But in my mind, only that question remained. I knew it was just an invitation between 2 friends, between a boss and an assistant, nothing more. But my heart refused to understand it that way. It was beating so fast I had to take a deep breath just to keep my voice steady. "Of course. I'd be glad to." Ezra smiled. A gentler smile than any before. Good then. At least. I won't lose a friend. Friend. Just one word. But enough to remind me of my place. I kept walking through the rain, gripping the umbrella handle a little tighter, telling myself that was enough. Being by Ezra's side, being seen by him as a friend, that was already more than I'd ever expected. And yet, people are greedy by nature. Once we've felt a little warmth, we start dreaming of the whole sun. And I didn't realize it at all, that from that rainy night on, the distance between friendship and love had quietly grown a little shorter once again.